I'm finding myself a lot in with every student really leaning into the internal information that one already has. In other words, it's a bit like uncovering something as opposed to building something.
Hi, and welcome to ForBassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. We've got a great interview this week with Matt Rybicki, an outstanding double bassist, jazz player. He is really incredible. We will get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you that if you've ever wanted to learn bass, but you think you're too old or your body won't cooperate or anything else like that, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community. A lot of them in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, men and women. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. You should come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. As I always say, you're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. Let me tell you about Matt Rybicki. He is a renowned bassist, author, and educator from Cleveland, Ohio. Matt has performed or recorded with acclaimed jazz artists Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, Ted Rosenthal, Terrell Stafford, Mark Whitfield, Gerald Clayton, and Ulysses Owens. Matt has traveled all around the world for performances and presentations at concert halls and festivals ranging from Italy to Qatar, Spain, and Taiwan. He's also presented at the 2013 International Society of Bassists Convention in Rochester, New York, currently on the faculty at the Juilliard School and the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Matthew has authored books for Hal Leonard Publications, including Ray Brown, Legendary Jazz Bassist, and he's co-authored the Goldmine series for bass, both of which were released in 2015. His debut album, Driven, was released in 2009. I was listening to that this morning. Awesome. Here is my interview with Matt Rybicki. Hi, Matt. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this. This is your first time on ForBassPlayersOnly.com. Welcome to the FBPO community.
Thank you so much, and hello to everyone.
You've done a lot of very impressive stuff, and I want to get into some of that. But let's start with the beginning, the early days. And I wanted to ask about your initial exposure to music and your, do you come from a musical family? Did you have brothers and sisters with their records playing? That kind of stuff. How were you first exposed to music and what attracted you to the bass?
Oh man, well, thank you again for having me, first of all, and what a interesting question, I think, for everybody. I mean, there's a reason that's sort of a standard question, isn't it? Because everybody's story is sort of reflects something about their personal journey, I think. And I think, a sort of a unique start in the sense that I'm second youngest of 10 kids. And we grew up in a funeral home in Cleveland. That was my dad's business, and so there wasn't necessarily any professional music happening around me. But
a lot of organ music, maybe, or was
yes, that exactly right.
Okay, stuff.
Yes, no, it's very true. Very true. Lots of organ, and so while there weren't professional musicians in my family at the time, with the music that my parents were listening to, with everything from Elvis to Ella Fitzgerald on records, on those, I'm sure you remember when record players and TVs were pieces of furniture. It was an actual
hi-fi.
Right. It was an actual piece of furniture, and my younger brother and I would go searching through that stuff and just love dropping the needle on anything. But then with so many siblings, with across the spectrum of age difference, so I was exposed to, pop music from a couple of different decades because there's so many, right?
Was there ever a time when all 10 of you lived in the house at the same time with your parents?
No, surprisingly, but we had been there many times, after that. But no, we didn't all live together at one time. There's about a 20-year difference between the youngest and the oldest. Yeah. So their experiences out of just pleasure gave me, some exposure to some different things. But I had not really fallen in love with straight ahead jazz, which is been my love for 30 years now. I hadn't really fallen in love with it till later. But in the beginning, I was following that pop and rock thing, and I started on electric bass because some friends of mine in eighth grade, so I was 12 or 13, were starting a band, quote unquote, and they wanted a bass player. And I said, I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. And it just so happened that it just meshed with my personality. And I think maybe that's the same for most of us, maybe musicians in general, but certainly bass players we don't really necessarily hog the spotlight. We like being supportive. And so our personality sort of fits the role of the instrument.
Was that your
Maybe.
first instrument?
Yes. Yeah. And was very serious in high school about becoming a rock star, like most of us are. And but I just truly loved it and tried to get instruction where I could, but didn't have any real sort of serious formal thing until I did my undergrad at Berklee College of Music, and so there. My information and my exposure and love for jazz grew there too, so that was part of that.
Who were your bass teachers at Berklee?
I had Whit Brown, who you may know, and John Rapucci, and Dave Clark, and a couple others too. You know how the classes work. Sometimes it's not, but Whit and John were sort of my two main private teachers.
Okay, yeah, because when I think of jazz, and we're doing probably electric and upright, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, I didn't actually take up upright until I got there, and it was sort of a bit of a fluke. And again, just by happenstance, I felt like it meshed with what I wanted to do and the personality that I have, and I started getting called to play, small gigs and sessions and stuff, just having started out. So I sort of switched while I was there, and it was great that I was there when I switched, because I was able to get direction in a very clear way from the teachers who were there.
You must have crossed paths with Bruce Gertz at some point, right?
Yes, absolutely. What an amazing and wonderful player and guy. Yes, I never had any classes. I maybe had one class with him, I think, but he was always so booked. Students, everybody took with Bruce too.
I think I heard that he retired. Did I hear that correctly?
It's possible. It's totally possible. Yeah. I've seen him. He's still active, but I don't know if he's still at the college.
I know some of the faculty members have been there 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I don't know how long Danny Moe has been there. And
Right.
Well, Rich Appleman, I'm sure, was there when you were there.
Yes. He was head of the department. Exactly. And did you know him, or do you know him?
Yeah, he endorsed my first book, I think, way
Amazing.
back.
You have a lot of books, sir. It's very impressive.
Well, you have a couple of books with Hal Leonard, also the best publishing company in the world, print music publishing company.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to get off track. I hear some of those names. I perk up, excited, and I just a bass geek anyway.
Yeah.
So well, when you first discovered the bass, you were already listening. You were exposed to all different kinds of music, given your situation. But once you started playing the bass and getting serious, did you start listening to music differently? Were you picking out the bass parts? Did you have any bass influences or bass heroes?
Right. Yeah. Yes, very much so. As to answer your question, and I absolutely was obsessed with Geddy Lee. And also, I don't know if you remember, we probably remember Billy Sheehan, right?
I remember Billy Sheehan. I think I've interviewed him 4 times.
I would imagine. Yeah, I would imagine. It doesn't surprise me that you know him. I was super obsessed with him and Geddy Lee and John Paul Jones, real like rock and roll, heavy metal guys. But I think it was really like that prog rock thing of Rush that had me sort of think, I actually start to think about what I would come to know as technique, right? I actually need to start thinking about more than just sort of what it feels like to be on stage and just trying to look cool. I actually want to sound like a good musician because I love this stuff. How do I do this stuff?
That's funny because
Yeah,
just on a tangent here, when I
yeah, yeah.
was hanging out with Billy Sheehan in Markneukirchen, Germany, we were at one of the Warwick base camps.
Nice.
He came up to me one night. He says, would you like to get together tomorrow and sit down and I'll show you some stuff?
What?
Yeah. So I have the whole video. It's like an hour and a half, but
Oh my gosh.
I said, Billy, it's really important. I want to learn the technique. I want to learn how to make
Mhm.
music, the things that we're talking about. But
Right.
can you show me something that looks cool too?
Did he? Did he?
Sure.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's what a gosh, monsters, all those guys.
Yeah.
So incredible. And so,
Um,
yeah, go ahead. And
well,
so,
when you mentioned prog rock, I was just
yeah.
curious if Chris Squire was also on your radar coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, sure, sure, sure. And I assume, have you interviewed him too?
Actually, I did. I did, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
a phone interview.
Oh, wow.
I
Amazing.
don't know how. I met him at a bass player live, and then we set it up there, and we did the phone interview. And I think that was a few years before he passed, so he was
Uh-huh.
still busy doing something. Great stories, great interview,
I'll
and
bet.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
that's a life fully lived.
oh yeah,
His life, right? I've been through a lot of things. What a also just so many unbelievable musicians in the world, man. It's like every time, like I just looking back and trying to learn more about you yourself. I'm like, my God, just another guy, just killing it. There's so many amazing players, and at the same time, it feels like you can run into the same people again and again and again. We sort of still know each other somehow.
yeah. Well, what about career-wise? How did you make the leap or the transition from learning bass and listening to it and having some mentors and some heroes to actually going out there and playing the bass for money and for
Right. Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. Well, that you and I share a little bit of something in that in our relationship to somewhat of a connection with Broadway shows and so on, from what I understand from your bio. But while outside of starting to do little gigs while in college, right at standing on the stage of my senior recital, my very last thing that I had to do to finish graduating, the pianist who I had hired comes up to me and says, "I have a gig for you." And so it was the Boston run of Tony and Tina's Wedding. Did you ever hear of this show, this off-Broadway
I
thing?
I've heard of it. I didn't play that,
Okay.
show, but it's yeah, it's back there in the
Yeah.
we're in the deep mental recesses of
Right.
yeah.
So that and like a community production of Guys and Dolls somewhere there before that sort of started a constant sort of string of like touching that area of playing again and again. It can be very, very fun, but also it certainly helps to get paid, right? To do that. So I was offered this gig to do this show in Boston, right there. You know what I mean? So I had a job right as I finished school, which was great. And then the run wasn't very long in Boston. So so after that, then I was engaged at the time to another woman other than my wife, my current wife. But that was a short-lived thing, but got me to New York ultimately. And in New York, I had known some people both from school and then also from the Boston scene. And so there I was able to just continue that process of taking any and every gig that I could and learning as much as I could. And there's a funny phenomenon I've found for other people like me who just come to New York. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this phenomenon or heard of this, where the very first gig I played in New York was on the stage at Alice Tully Hall. Because, right, like how in the world? But I think one of the guys I knew from Boston, he had started this ensemble in New York that essentially played what we think of as world music. It was essentially a blend of jazz and musics of the different influenced by different things in the world. One of the players was of South Indian descent, and it was like India's Independence Day at Alice Tully Hall, so they hired the band. So like that was my first gig, And then after that, it's 15 years of nothing, right? But I found that phenomenon to be true for lots of people. Like their very first thing is like this explosion, and then you're hooked, and then the rest of the time is just trying to get back to that high, But yeah, so then once in New York, the struggle, man. I was the first couple of years were gigging as much as I could, but not getting paid much at all, and working at the National Kidney Foundation in the office and stuff like that. But slowly started to build. I remember saving my very first $200 check from Wycliffe Gordon, who I played with for a while, a trombone player. I like saved a photocopy of the check, because it was so much money at the time. And so then it just progressed to there again, touching on as many players as I could, as much learning as I could do, and also trying to maintain some sense of integrity also at the same time. And that's not to take away from anybody that plays anything if you need to put bread on your table. It's not that. It's more the integrity of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to stray too far from that. And so that sort of desire eventually, thankfully, leads me to start to sort of fall in with the guys in the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. And I'm, like I mentioned, Wycliffe Gordon and all the folks that were in the orchestra around that time in the late 90s. And so I started a professional relationship with them, which was great, and got to play with them, not formally or on tour or anything, but here and there also as individuals. And then I was also with the big band once or three times, I think I played with them. But got to know Winston very well and hang out with him all the time and like learn a lot from him. And then when the Juilliard Jazz program started, I auditioned and didn't get in the first time, even though all the guys were guys I knew. And Rodney Whitaker was the bass player at the time. Stop me if I'm talking too much, by the way, John.
No, this is good.
The bass player is Rodney Whitaker. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rodney.
Yeah, he's about a mile from where I'm sitting right now.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Oh my gosh. One of the most amazing bass players and teachers I've ever known. And I knew him from when he was in the big band, and he was teaching at Juilliard that first year. And so he said to me after that audition, he was like, "What happened, man? It was just a D flat blues, like they just said, okay, you do your prepared stuff and then play a blues in D flat." And I was so flustered, I just really, I crashed, man. And it was terrible. He was like, "It was just a D flat blues." So I felt, 2 inches tall. And then, of course, went home and shed all weird keys of blueses, and then applied again the year after and got in. Because when they started out with just 2 bass players, and then the year I started, which was the next calendar year, they added a third, which was me. They added a third bass player. And so I was able to be part of the first graduating class, even though I didn't start with them. And so I got what's called an artist diploma from Juilliard, which is like a graduate performance degree as opposed to a graduate academic degree, so to speak.
Excuse me, they had 2 bass students that they augmented to 3 bass students?
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, there was 1 big band, that was it, and 3 rhythms, or 2 rhythm sections essentially, and then 3 rhythm sections. That was it. Yeah. And so it was a very wild time in there because everyone's still figuring stuff out. And so there was just a lot of highs and a lot of lows as the whole community there is figuring out what to do. And like the classical students didn't want us there. Like we had to go uptown to rehearse in a church. Like they wouldn't even let us rehearse in a building. It was wild, man. But
I remember when I was at college, I went to Wayne State University for my undergrad in Detroit.
Yeah.
And some of I shouldn't have mentioned the name of this. Well, I don't know who the old piano faculty guys were, but they wouldn't allow the guys to play jazz on the piano because it hurt the piano. But no, you can play Rachmaninoff and Liszt and all
right.
You can't play jazz, which is probably not as.
Oh my gosh!
For lack of a better word, I don't.
Yeah.
When did the jazz program start at Juilliard? Because I remember I interviewed Christian McBride a couple of times on there, and when he mentioned he went to Juilliard, I assumed it was for classical.
You're right.
No. I said I didn't know they had a jazz program. He says they do now. So I guess he went through that program. So that started when, in the 90s?
No. there must have been some miscommunication somewhere. It started in 2001.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of why he would have said that, unless there was
Well,
just some
unless he was on
misunderstanding.
the faculty there, maybe I
Yeah,
should.
that, yes. I mean,
It makes more sense.
yeah, he has come and gone, and maybe that's what he thought you were asking,
Okay.
or something. I'm not sure.
Sounds like you know a lot more about it than I do.
He wasn't there when I was there, and but Ron Carter has been teaching. Ben Wolf was teaching when I was there, because Rodney had left for Michigan that year that I got in. So Ben Wolf was teaching, and now and he's still teaching. Ben Wolf and Ron Carter was there for a few years. So they've had just a whole bunch of great players there. But there's very few actual bass players in the department at all.
Did you study any classical double bass when you were at Juilliard?
No, actually, I didn't, and I wish I had. I had the opportunity in theory, but I was so overwhelmed with work from the jazz program that I wish I had somehow figured it out. But I say to people sometimes, what I learned, one of the biggest lessons I learned during that time was how to like turn in an assignment that I wasn't happy with, because there was literally not enough time in the day for me, the way I work at least, to get something either performance wise or a writing assignment or something. I couldn't get it to where I wanted. So I just had to be okay with turning in less than what I wanted.
Sometimes good is good enough.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I'm just curious though, who was or who were the classical double bass teachers when you were there?
Oh, I think Orrin O'Brien was still there. I wonder.
Orrin O'Brien,
Tim
who was
Cobb.
a
Yeah.
woman, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think Tim Cobb, if I'm not mistaken, would come back and forth from. I think he's in Connecticut normally. And I fear it. I feel a little embarrassed. I don't remember everybody's there. Somebody who's listening is probably screaming at their phone or whatever.
Oh,
blah, 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 but I don't
I'm not
remember
putting
all the
you on the
classical
spot.
teachers.
It wasn't
Yeah.
your area. You just, it was in your
Yeah.
periphery. So
Right. But I'll tell you, there's have you ever interviewed or heard Dave Wong, the bass player? David Wong.
Corey Wong. That's where my mind.
I gotcha.
Haven't heard back from him yet. No, Dave. I know that name, but no.
Okay. He a native Manhattanite who went to Juilliard at the same time, but did the classical program, bass player, but always loved jazz even before, like I met him before he was even in school. And he is one of those guys, and you may know there's just a few of them that can legitimately live in both worlds. I mean, he was playing with Roy Haynes right up until he just passed a couple of weeks ago. Like, he's the most heavy jazz player you've ever heard and can just kill the legit stuff. I mean, that was his degree, was the legit stuff. So that made me mad, but also helped to keep me like a little bit connected to that part of the school at the time. But they were very separate, not necessarily not because we didn't like each other, even though I said some folks didn't want us there, but more just because you just have your track, right? There's so many things you're focusing on, and unless there's a purposeful combination of the two sort of divisions, you don't really cross paths too often.
Does the word legit still get thrown around in that context?
I don't know. To me, but maybe it's old school.
What else? I was going to ask you something else, but I don't remember.
I forgot it. That's okay.
Keep talking.
Yeah. So, during the Juilliard program, then I sort of really felt an even closer connection to what I was trying to do. Like, every big moment, going back to Berklee for a second, I wasn't really sure I wanted to be there, and I left halfway through the program after a couple of years. And
which program?
At Berklee, right? Yes. And I had left and sort of took a year off. I wasn't really sure what I wanted. I was in that position of sort of deciding, do I want to not only pursue this professionally, but also, do I want to keep playing electric and sort of try to do the rock thing, or try to do the straight ahead jazz thing? And that year was a real eye opener for me. And I really got so committed I decided basically I really want to figure out this jazz thing. And so my time back there was so meaningful and profound, because I knew exactly what I wanted. I was completely motivated to be there. I knew the teachers I needed to go after, and so on and so forth. So moments like that, and moments like, playing your first Broadway show, or playing on the Alice Tully Hall stage, or hanging out with Wynton Marsalis, or going into the Juilliard program. What I'm saying is that each of those not just reinforced, but felt like a push forward towards continuing to work through the sacrifices we have to make. And boy, aren't there sometimes. So all those things were meaningful and a real wind at the sail sort of moment, winds at your sail sort of moment to sort of keep me going. And so I ended up spending 26 total years in Manhattan, playing any and everything, and thankfully getting a chance to tour the world, and finishing these books you mentioned, and as I say, playing on Broadway and any kind of gig you can imagine, and seeing an amazing, unbelievable, unspeakably good performances, on stages everywhere. You know how it is, like, in New York and so on and so forth. Like sitting at a gig and Stevie Wonder just shows up and sits in, that was a normal kind of occurrence as far as like that, but also the level of jazz guys too. So it was a very, very special time. And honestly, I just got burnt out mentally and emotionally. It's so taxing to live there for 25 plus years. And I had a young son. Today is his birthday. He's 8 today. Yeah, Miles is his name.
Happy birthday from Uncle John.
Thank you, Uncle John. So Miles is 8 today, but he was young at the time. The pandemic happened, and my wife and I said, I think it's time to try to find a different page in the book of to turn the page on a new chapter. So we're in North Carolina now for a couple of years, and it's been really great. It's been awesome.
Well, great. So you've done a lot. What's keeping you busy these days? What do you do?
Yeah, well, lots of playing and teaching, thankfully. I'm doing a visiting artist position at the University of North Carolina School for the Arts here in Winston-Salem. And you mentioned Pembroke, but I had done that last year, but the drive was really long to only go a couple times a week. It was over 3 hours. So I had to try to find some other way to not spend so much money on gas. But so I'm at School of the Arts this year, and then it hopefully will turn into a more permanent thing next year. But there's a new director of the jazz department there who is a really inspirational and amazing player named Steve Alford. And he is really revitalizing the scene, I think, in general here, which is great. So lots of random gigs, everything from concerts in concert halls to retirement centers to background gigs. You know how it goes. And then teaching too privately and online. This YouTube channel I started about 1.5 years ago is going really, really well.
Good. Well, let's talk about put your educator hat on for a
minute. Okay.
I want to talk about that. And let me give you a little context here. For Bass Players Only, as you know, is a bass instruction site. Mm-hmm. And it's really for people who've get to a certain point in their life and they realize they never really learned to play an instrument. So a lot of times, a lot of the people are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, men and women.
Amazing.
And they're not trying to be rock stars. They want to get together with their friends and play some blues shuffles or some classic rock riffs or maybe some walking bass. Some of them like jazz. Some of them like slapping. They like music from usually classic rock from the 60s and 70s and some other stuff. Right. And a lot of times when people get to that age, 50s, 60s, 70s, and the body gets a little pushback, arthritis, tendonitis. Some of them are recovering from surgery. I'm not trying to paint a gloomy picture here.
Right.
Just trying to give you context because I want to ask you, as a professional musician, professional bass player, professional educator, what advice could you impart to somebody like that who wants to play music and have fun? What kind of goals should they have? What should they be thinking about? What should they, what should they be aspiring to do? Jump in anywhere.
Right. That is an awesome question. And I've been lucky to also have a few experiences with some folks that are my seniors, seniors to me, my elders. And I always come at that with the highest level of appreciation and inspiration, honestly, because it's truly out of love in that situation, right? I mean, it's almost like when you start when you're a teenager, you go back to that when you're able to have some time in your life to devote once again to something that you loved. So it's always inspirational. And I find, I'm sure you have this in your own life as well as with your students, that the more mature, oftentimes the more responsibility, which means the less time people have, the less time in the day they have. And so I try to invite folks to rely on their experiences in life in general related to the discipline involved with focus, and to try to make sure that everything that they're working on, whether I give it to them or not, as far as an assignment or an idea, that there's no extraneous time in their dedicated time to practicing and learning. So you really don't want to be just fiddling around. That is not practicing, right? And in fact, the goal of practicing, your practice should sound bad if you're actually practicing, because you're trying to practice something you don't know how to do. And so to give oneself permission for that. And then to also give oneself permission for rest, which is, I think something that, again, mature folks know about, but just to be reminded, I think is maybe can be helpful when you're trying something new. Like, no, it's okay to rest. And also remember, our mind needs time to process new information. You actually just need minutes, hours in a day to let it sort of sink in. And so that repeated sort of gentle approach of focus, giving yourself rest, and even if just repeating all those old adages of you can't cram it all in one thing. You've got to do it across some amount of time because you need to have time to assimilate the information. So consistent time, even if it's 30 minutes. And I've had folks say, hey, come on. I've heard people say like 5 minutes a day is going to help, and they're like, come on. I know, this is a very, very much a mature person saying like, that's ridiculous. You can't, and I don't argue with it. It's true. Like if you just do 5 minutes, it's probably not going to be terribly helpful as far as making a lot of progress. But at the same time, 20 minutes, exponentially is more. 30 minutes is exponentially more. I'm saying like if you do that consistently from the day to day. So that's sort of one area that I think about when I'm trying to help folks. And the other thing I would say too is I'm finding myself a lot with every student really leaning into the internal information that one already has. In other words, it's a bit like uncovering something as opposed to building something. Many of us who are raised in Western music have an internal sense of phrase lengths. Like we know what 4 bars feels like in our body, even if you can't identify it. We know what 8 bars feels like. And just to really try to invite and encourage and sort of gently prod folks to be like, you actually have so much information already. It's not, you don't have to worry about X, Y, Z, to get to that point. You're already there. And to just have this sense of support and let's uncover this together sort of feeling. The other thing too is just I am inspired, and I sort of try to reflect that back to them too, that it should be fun. That's sort of the goal. So if there's something that you think you should do, right? If there's something you think you should do and you really don't want to do it, don't. There are 10,000 other things you can choose from that will help you, and maybe you'll get to that thing or maybe not. But if it's truly pulling teeth to whatever, try to figure out like whatever you're trying to play your arpeggios, 3-octave arpeggios, with the tensions on them, whatever. Like, don't do that right now. Do something else. Have fun. Like you and I and professionals, we have that double-edged sword. There is the highest highs and also the real feels empty sometimes, man. Just doing this is like, it does become a job sometimes. Nonetheless, of course, we love it, but still.
Very inspiring words. You could be my mentor.
Vice versa, man.
I try to do a lot of that stuff, but the recharging and the resting and the relaxing, I know I should, and in my mind, I think I'm pretty good at it, but I know
Right.
my father always used to tell me, take it easy, take a break. But now my wife tells me that you've got
Right,
uh,
right.
there's you also reminded me there is a book that has been a bestseller for years. Wall Street Journal, New York Times. It's called Atomic Habits by
Ah,
James Clear.
okay.
And he said, get into the habit. If you only have 5 minutes a day, take
Hmm.
5 minutes a day and make it a habit. If you're trying
Yeah,
to write a book and you don't want to, the drudgery of writing, write one sentence a day,
yeah,
then
yeah.
write two, then write.
Mm.
The point is to try to improve atomically, just a little bit, and how that compounds over time. And he talks about athletes, and he talks about musicians, and he talks about
Yeah.
it's atomic habits.
I just wrote it down while you were talking, and I love that because it just gave insight that sort of contradicts what I said, and I get it, something I didn't see before, which is, and I don't know if this is necessarily the intention in full, but it's if you do devote 5 minutes consistently, suddenly you want to do more. There's that phenomenon too. And so that can be a benefit as well of devoting a little bit of time, is that suddenly if you will see some kind of progress and then you want to do more.
Right. Can you do one push up a day? Can you do?
Right.
I didn't think it was contradicting you. I thought I was, in sync and in harmony with
Yeah.
your point. But anyway, it's good information, and
Yeah.
I hope you folks can benefit from it as well. What about the future, Matt? What else? I mean, you've done a lot, and you've made sounds like a very healthy change recently, moving to the
North
Carolinas.
Carolinas. Yeah.
You've done a lot. Is there something else that you're either working on, or is there something that you've always wanted to do and haven't gotten around to yet? Someday I'm gonna.
Right, right, right. Well, I finally feel like I have the time to get down in the weeds. I finally feel like I have the time to really try and work more on my vocabulary as far as improvisational vocabulary, and I have taken too shallow a study of the most the deepest parts of bebop, for example.
Charlie Parker Omnibook. The pages are probably coming off because you probably worked with that, right? Right?
I tried. Yeah, man, I tried, but I didn't that's too, you know what I mean? Like I want to get deeper than that, Like I want to make some real I want to understand it on a different level. And so that is like a real, like I say, in the weeds sort of thing that I'm thinking about a lot recently, and really spending a lot of time listening and spending a lot of time sort of on that path. And then I really hope to be able to record some new material soon. It's been a while since my CD was released, and while it was great, and I'm very happy with it and proud of it, it would be really nice to sort of document some feelings and thoughts and playing now. And being new to this general area, to the Southeast, thankfully I feel pretty deeply connected already to the community that's here, jazz-wise. But yet there's more to do as far as getting a chance to play with some folks that I keep seeing, but they're maybe just a little bit too far away to get together all the time, great players. And I also would love to lead my own project in this general area a little bit more often. Right now I'm doing everything as a sideman, other than like background gigs, corporate gigs. And which is great, you know what I mean? But I would love to just present more of my own personal sort of independent thoughts. And this YouTube channel has grown, and I want to continue to grow it. I enjoy it very, very much. And it's so nice to have such quick and varied responses that make me feel like I'm helping folks, and that they feel they're getting something from what I'm trying to suggest. So it gives me a great sense of accomplishment, and it also just feels good. Almost feels like I don't know, that you're helping, whatever that feeling is. And it's fun to edit the stuff, and it's fun to come up with ideas and so on and so forth. As you know, as a content creator, or whatever you say, sometimes getting that content can be a bear for various reasons, but I like the process. It's a lot of fun. And I just released these 5 courses all at once that have been really, it's going very, very well. And I'm happy with that and want to continue to not only share that, but also develop some more things. Specifically, I'm thinking about the next course being directly related to Ray Brown, since I have this transcription book of his that I did for Hal Leonard, and there's so much more to do. And I got to know him and meet him and have the lessons with him, and so yeah, it was really something. So like, I want to, and I know folks love him, so I think that would make a sense to have some kind of dedicated thing just to his work.
It's great that you have so much energy, but it's even greater to see that you still have so much ambition, because you just rattled off on. But you realize how much you just said?
I know it still doesn't feel like enough though. I'm very like, I'm an overachiever, like big time, man.
Well, just do something every day, and that will compound. And you've already done a lot, so you can do it. Well, that's great. I can't wait to see and hear what you're going to come up with next.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. I have one more question for you. Try to imagine, what would you be if you were not a bass player? Something outside of music.
I love science-related things having to do with both astronomy and quantum physics. And I don't know if the way my brain is wired at this point would ever have, if I could, if my brain was as it is now back when I was 15, I'm not sure if I ever could have done it with the math and so on and so forth. Like I'm, it's so left brain. I am so right brained with the creative side.
Yes.
But nonetheless, I'm absolutely fascinated with it. And there's a pianist, by the way, as an aside, in New York named Dan Tepfer, who was an actual quantum physicist, I believe, and also plays the most genius jazz piano you've ever heard in your life. But like his job was as a quantum physicist, and he was like, "Nah, I'm going to go ahead and just play jazz." But nonetheless, yeah, that just always captures me, fascinates me, is endlessly entertaining to learn about, and so that's maybe what I'd be doing.
I did very well in biology, and I did just fine in chemistry. I kind of liked chemistry. It was different. Physics just blew my mind.
Man, that early stuff is rough.
And I'm thinking, how do they know that? and astronomy. My brother was into, he bought an expensive telescope when we were kids, and he's looking at, oh, look, there's Jupiter and this, and me, I'm thinking about what I got to do tomorrow. And I don't share this too often, but I am uneasy about the fact that the Earth we're just floating out here. And this sounds crazy, but I always say I'd feel better if we were all on solid ground somewhere. But I understand that's not how the universe is formed. So
right. I love that perspective, though. That's very funny.
I figured, you know what? We've been here this long. I think we'll be here tomorrow, because I got to do it tomorrow. I got to get done. And this is great. And I didn't mention, I mentioned before we started recording, but I was listening to your album this morning, Driven, right?
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. And I mentioned it's an awesome band, and the trombone player really got my attention. Was it Michael Deese, you said?
Michael Deese, yeah, exactly. We were in Juilliard at the same time.
Oh, okay.
As was Ulysses.
Right. And of course, there's some awesome bass playing on there as well.
Thank you.
Hey, there was a question, wrapping it up here, but I'm just curious. What would you ever have the guts to walk down the hallway in the Juilliard Music School holding an electric bass?
These days, yes, for sure. But I would do so knowing full well I might get some side eye.
Somebody with it. If they bully you.
Oh man.
All right. Well, this has been great. I used to go to New York all the time. Well, now you're in the Carolinas, but my wife and I have been talking about going down there sometime too. But it's
oh
nice.
Man, come hang.
I will come hang. And if you ever get up to Michigan, I mentioned Rodney Whitaker is like a mile
Oh
away, and
yeah.
right where Michigan State University is. There's some great players on the faculty there. And
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes.
all right, well, let's leave it on an up note. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Matt. I really appreciate it, and I hope our paths will cross soon and often, and we'll hang in person. I think we were in the same place at the same time. I read somewhere you were at the ISB convention in Rochester, New York, in 2013.
Right. Yes.
I was
You were
there.
there.
I was there. Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah. Rufus Reed and
John Clayton.
Don Clayton, Dave Holland, Steve
Hmm.
Bailey, Victor Wooten. Oh, Adam Ben Ezra. Do you know him?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. And boy, I'm trying to remember. I think Bruce Gertz was there.
Yes. Hmm.
Ron Carter was there. Yeah. Anyway, we have to stop at some point. So,
Thank you so much, John. This has really, really been a treat. I've enjoyed it so much.
well, so have I. Thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
You too.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Wow, what an incredible interview. What an incredible player. Incredible guy. Matt Rybicki is awesome. If you ever have a chance to see him live or to pick up any of his recordings, don't hesitate to do that. You will not be disappointed. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. I'm John Liebman, founder and first baseman. If you've ever wanted to learn bass, you should know that right now there are thousands of people inside the For Bass Players Only community. A lot of them in their 50s, 60s, 70s. I've got students in their 80s, both men and women. And you know what they're doing? They're learning bass. They're having the time of their life playing music that they love. You should come join them and experience that incredible transformation for yourself. As I always say, you're never too old to groove. So let's play bass. I will see you right back here next week, same time, same place, with another bass player interview. In the meantime, let's play bass.